X, Y, or Z. And I assume X, Y, or Z. And so it's kind of like interesting to me just to think about, you know, how many times I've seen somebody get harassed for sleeping on the sidewalk or whatever. And I know that we're mostly just checking in with their, you know, their gotta make sure that they're, you know, everything's okay with them. But it's just, it's heartbreaking to think of those kinds of laws. And is there anybody else with their hand up? I didn't think.
I would like to share something real quickly. Thank you, Ruby, for bringing up this very sensitive and very timely real life situation about decriminalizing and being criminalized. And when you were asking us to meditate, I could think of a plethora of things. One that came to my mind recently, and I'm sharing this as a person with lived experience, and also, and my name is Patricia, I'm one of the board members on the COC board, new to the board. Well, you mentioned, Ruby, natural disasters. Something just happened. Well, our family was uprooted in a crisis a few years ago, and the matriarch of our family suddenly took ill. And we got the news that they were terminally ill and they would not be living it too much longer. And we had to really prepare, but this was our home for years. Thankful to our parents, grandparents who, and as African-American Black people who provided a home for us no matter what, that we could be home. The situation I want to quickly refer to is that when you take that foundation away and then we're all asked, all of a sudden it happens, we have to each fend for, well, we're dealing with the grief, and then we have to figure out where we're going to stay. We're reaching out to the only resources that we know, and in a time of COVID and XYZ, the system, I have my car. That's my home right now. And the decriminalization piece being criminalized is that there are people, good people in the community that says, I know you, it's okay for you to park here. You can come into the store, Ruby, and use the restroom. Somebody else looks at you, who is this person? And then you're getting targeted. And this experience is real targeted because of the skin of your color. I don't know what, but the point is that, guess what? The flashlight, here comes the police. This is a Black person in the car. What are you doing? I have permission. I have, everything's valid. Guess what? You have to leave. You're going to jail. Take you to jail, wherever you are. Your car gets impounded. Wow. We have no access. And then it comes up with money, fees, burden on the family, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, with that being taken, all your belongings, now you're out here with nothing.
You're right.
That is criminalization.
That is criminalization.
And we're talking about looking at that. How do you think we're able to live and survive? I just wanted to share that.
No, you're right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. So we have a few hands up. Tamara, and then Jade, and Lise, you're third. Tamara, if you want to start us off.
Sure. Thank you so much for having this conversation. As you know, I've been really harping on this for a while. And I think talking about this is so critical because I think as humans, we have to be self-reflective and realize that we have been complicit in some of these policies that have been enacted. But we also have the power as humans to unlearn some of the things that we've done, like the social stratification of human beings and measuring worth based on productivity or you know, how well someone scores on a test or some like silly things like that. We have to stop like dehumanizing each other because that's where policies really do, like in changing the culture of how we do policy making, because we base our policies on our perceptions of a group of people, like folks who are living unhoused. If they are having a mental health crisis, then they are dangerous and therefore need to be jailed and put into jail. That's the kind of crap that we need to like unlearn and destroy, dismantle, like completely get that out of our radar, so that we can develop more holistic, compassionate caring policy that actually centers the humanity of people who are experiencing homelessness and other hardships. Like I think until we can start like doing real talk, we have to start with real talk, you know, and challenging the status quo does not have to be like super, you know, adversarial. I know it's something that like puts people in a position of discomfort, but that's why our elected officials signed up for the job that they did. It is incumbent upon us now to make them do what they always say they're going to do when they're campaigning. Like if you really do want to see folks getting in recovery, or you really want to see folks you know, get off the streets, give them housing. How about we stop like commodifying housing and actually make it a human right, which it is. You know, so I'm just, I could go on for days.
We love you,
but
Tamara.
Really, I love you guys.
You're most of the reason. I mean, you're the reason that I think this really did get on the agenda in the long run. Is, you know, you're frivolous, like, you know, or not frivolous. That's not the word. You're fervent. That's right. Is that the word? Hang on. Anyway, whatever word I was thinking of, that's what you have. And so I think next was Jade. Jade Weiss.
Thank you so much, Ruby and Tamara, for leading this conversation or making sure it got onto the agenda truly. And I'm just grateful for the conversation that we've been having. I've been taking notes. Everything that everybody's been saying so far leads to Tamara's point. So I was so glad that you went right before me, because I was going to bring up it's the root of it is dehumanizing. It's like something that, especially in like the NIMBY brain and mostly the politicians' brains too, when someone becomes unhoused, they automatically just like revoke their humaneness, and then subscribe all of these labels to them, and then think that throwing them into a cage is going to solve all the problems, whether it's a cage in a jail or a cage in a mental health facility. And that those same tactics have been used for decades now. And it's like, to be real, clearly it's not working. If those methods would have worked, they would have worked by now. And to your point, if I was thinking about, you know, reflecting about, you know, in the meditation that you told us that you led, and my lived experience comes from mostly in my childhood. In my adult life, I have had, you know, housing instability where I've couch surfed, but the worst kind of lived experience I've had was in my childhood, although we weren't living in camps. So I experienced being humanized at the worst just because I was a kid, you know, but my mom's a brown woman, and I did experience like folks treating me, being the white, you know, me and my sisters a lighter than my mom, and because we were kids different. But immediately, like when I was like, okay, if I was on Third Ave, would I have been criminalized? My answer was like, well, no, because I look like a white person, you know. And like, to be real, like that's the tea. And that I hate that reality that we're living in, and that's the realness of it. But because of the folks automatically humanize whiteness first, because that's the system that they've created under this stupid race structure. And to Jaja's point, and the earlier points about that, it can happen to anybody. And with that, when that stabilization is revoked, when someone's going through grief, and they are, in addition to dealing with being unhoused, I just think about, we talked about the refugee camps a little bit, and I can't not speak about what's happening in Palestine. It's just heavy on my heart. And what they're experiencing, truly, it could happen to anybody. It could definitely happen to us here. And we do see it happening in microcosms around here. And so human rights is just such a pertinent issue. And that is the root issue of like how you know, criminalization is sprouted from, or whatever, because they just stop seeing people as humans the moment a mistake is made, or the moment. And in this case, it's not, folks are victims of bad policy, not because of their own choices. So anyway, I'm just really grateful for this conversation, and thank you for everything that everybody's been saying.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Lise is next. I just wanted to quickly say thank you for sharing that. You know, I think that it's important to remember that, you know, I work on Third Avenue, and so I see daily like people just walking past everybody, you know, and I feel like it's getting to the point where people can't like be like this heartless anymore. They have to kind of start to think about the issue. So I'm really glad that we're having this discussion. Thank you, Lise. It's all you.
Yeah, thank you, Jade, and thank you, Ruby. But Jade, especially, I just wanted to thank you so much for bringing Palestine into the room. It's absolutely not okay how they're being treated, like not only by Israel, but by the US government backing this all so violently. But I wanted to talk about like not only like how we survive, but like means of survival, how those means of survival are criminalized.
Yeah.
That I wanted to bring up especially is like sex work, especially survival sex work, and just like in general, what that is like treated by the government. And I pulled up some stats. So prior to the 1970s, marital was legal in every US state. I know people who are older than this. That's fucking nuts. Pardon my language.
That's good. Earmuffs. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. So what that tells us is that the government does not care about women benefiting from sex at all. And especially whenever we look at survival sex work, women are allowed to have sexual pleasure now, but not allowed to have it for benefits in terms of like survival. And that, I hate it. So survival sex work absolutely should not be something that folks are going to jail for. And then on top of that, women of color are especially incarcerated at higher rates than white or sex work charges.
Thank you so much for bringing that to the table. That's one of my that's one of my next kind of steps, is focusing a lot on the like definitely underrepresented, under acknowledged and hard, it's a hard subject to touch on, I think, in this environment. And so thank you for bringing that up. I do have like I have a lot of friends that, have experiences with that. And it's not something that should be, it should be definitely tended to. They need service by people that have been in their position, and they need wraparound care if they're trying to get, if they're trying to get out of that sort of work. And so thank you guys. This is great conversation. I'm really excited to continue to hear. Jaja?
Yeah, I just want, I sat here and I was thinking, and you said about criminalization. My mother is 81 years old. My grandmother died, and the home the home we grew up in, the home I could always go to, 2085 Churchill Street, Eugene, Oregon, was there, a family home. My grandmother died, and we didn't know about it, the mortgage thing.
Yeah.
My mom put all her life, what do you call 401k, because she worked at the hospital, into that house.
Yeah.
My mom is now, go back like 5 years, maybe, she was 76, 75. She's homeless.
Yep.
They took the house away. My mom's 75, homeless.
Yep. That's not okay.
Homeless.
That's not okay.
How can you be homeless at 75 when you paid into the system and you've done everything you could do? And where do you go?
And you invested.
And luckily, she had a sister who took her in. You know what I mean? But my mom is homeless at 75.
That's ridiculous.
And did they want to criminalize her? She was scared to death.
Yeah.
Where did she go?
Yeah.
What did she do? How did she survive?
She doesn't. It's
You know
tough
what I
out there,
mean? And so when I think about criminalizing homelessness, people need to think about seniors who are aging out,
Yeah.
right?
Or didn't pay their property
And
tax.
they have no one, right? They worked all their life for this system that is turning against them.
That's right. And I think it's important to focus on that criminalization point. They're criminalizing us when they're being criminals themselves. And so, like, let's be realistic. So like, how do they be criminals though? With the way they're harming the community is through acts of living laws. So this is legislation, and this is like ordinances and things like that that are going to go into effect, like the public drug use, which I personally saw somebody be arrested for. 5 feet in front of me, they jumped out of an unmarked vehicle and arrested a young lady. And I don't think she was a dealer. She didn't look like one. It was public use, and so it's like kind of scarring for me. But anyway, so how policy is used by law enforcement and politicians to punish people living unsheltered for doing normal, unappealing human things or actions. HUD maintains the stance on harmful acts of living laws. What they say from their HUD exchange is that in recent years, the United States has seen a proliferation of local measures to criminalize acts of living laws and prohibit sleeping, eating, sitting, and panhandling in public spaces. City, town, and county officials are turning to criminalization measures in an effort to broadcast a zero tolerance approach to street homelessness and temporarily reduce the visibility of homelessness in their communities. And again, that's a definition or a statement from HUD on their HUD Exchange page. But I also have a stat up here from the National Homelessness Law Center, and it shows that 48 states have at least one law restricting behaviors that prohibit the conduct of people experiencing homelessness. So just the other day in Ballard, I saw no sitting or no sitting down or sleeping, laying on the sidewalk between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m.
And they're benefiting and property.
And they're benefiting and profiting by going into the system, exactly, by the jail system. You're right. A lot of those are privately owned, you know?
Yeah.
And here, you know, we have some examples of types of active living laws. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. And these are just, you know, things that are prohibiting sleeping in public, citywide, or in a particular public place, which is hard to say, particular public place. Prohibiting camping in a public citywide or in a particular public place. Also, sitting in line can be prohibited. Lodging, living, or sleeping in vehicles, as you said. I've experienced living in vehicles or parking a vehicle that is used as a lodging or living accommodation. So that's RVs, anything really, you know, trailer. Prohibiting loitering, loafing, which I'd never heard. I mean, I've heard it in a cat context, but vagrancy can be citywide prohibited. Loitering or loafing in particular public places like Berrien City Hall, for instance. Prohibiting loitering, laws that prohibit panhandling in public places, or limiting, banning, or requiring onerous permitting for food sharing citywide or in particular public places. So the next slide is going to focus on, this is kind of a zoom out. I don't have to go through every point on this, but I wanted to make sure that I was being aware of anybody that has like any sort of restriction or an inability to read this slide. So I'm going to go through it. 4 states have laws restricting camping in public statewide. 15 states also restrict camping in particular public places. 1 state has, and these are old stats, I'm sure it's more now, but one state has a law restricting sleeping in public statewide sleeping in public. 3 states restrict sleeping in particular public places, and 4 restrict lodging, living, or sleeping in vehicles. 6 states restrict sitting and lying down in particular public places. 16 have laws restricting loitering, loafing, and vagrancy statewide. And nearly half of the US, that's 24 states, restrict loitering, loafing, and vagrancy in particular public places. 6 have laws restricting panhandling, and 4 states restrict panhandling in particular public places. And 7 have laws restricting the type of panhandling that they do. And then 36 have the laws restricting pedestrians for standing in the roadways, which I kind of understand. But this is the important topic that I should say, is that these can be used to criminalize homelessness, and that not always homeless people are the ones being targeted by these, you know, but.
So Ruby, when I hear these laws, and it seems like it's elitism.
Yep, yeah.
And classism.
Yep, it's 100 though.
Right? And it's like, if you're poor, you're criminalized.
Yep.
Because that's basically what it boils down to. Because if you're home, vagrancy, loitering, you don't have no money. You can't panhandle, how you gonna get something to eat?
Yes, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Or,
And the types of panhandling, I'm a street musician. What do you mean?
right.
In panhandling, that is in Humboldt County. I don't know why, like in Humboldt County, that's illegal. You cannot stand in front of a business and play music for money. That is illegal. Why? I don't know.
Is there a union or musicians union or something?
It's just the location, I think. It's really weird. It's, you know, and so that's, you know, another topic, if you look like it. Again, really quickly before we move on, as a busker, as I say, a street musician, I'm carrying a cart around with my amp and my guitar. Guess who looks homeless?
Right.
Guess who gets told that they can't stand on the bus when they're on the bus. Like the guy will play the little recording of, please hold on, please sit, don't block the aisleways, when it's literally 1/4 inch in the aisle because they think I'm homeless. And it has to be, you know, people won't get out of my way when I need to use the ramps and stuff like that. They'll look at me and just look away. So I'm sure other people have experienced similar, you know, things when you haven't done yourself up pretty or whatever, you know.
Right. Right. Or you could be done up pretty.
Or you could be, you know,
Right.
it doesn't even
It's
matter.
just an assumption of what someone is.
Yeah, and
Right.
they can't be doing that.
Yeah.
So, thank you guys for, okay, yeah, thank you guys for making space for this conversation in this room here. So King County's landscape, let's talk about that. With our COC being King County, Seattle, we do have some criminalization going on locally. And I believe I couldn't find as many as I thought there was. I thought there was an Auburn camping ban,
There is.
but I couldn't find any articles on it, which was a
There
little
is an
weird.
outbound camping
Yeah,
ban.
so they didn't make it on the list just because I didn't have a reference point for it. But Mercer Island, which, as we know, elitism, we said something about,
Right.
I don't know how much cost of living is out there, but it would be nice to live there. And Burien used the language from Mercer Island as a model for their camping ban. That's very interesting information to me.
Newcastle.
Yeah, Newcastle, I'm sure, yeah. City of Kent passed, it, you know,
That's
and,
where I live, and I know they passed that law, and they passed it after Auburn passed their law.
okay, see, I knew it. Burien approved a camping ban while delaying decisions as to where to put a shelter. Let's look that up.
The land of the city.
The last thing I want to mention is the Des Moines City Council passing zoning code restrictions on where shelters could be built without, they can't be within 1,000 feet of blah, blah, blah. Federal Way denied an application for an overnight shelter to an organization that was already operating a day center, not an overnight shelter. And they said that they couldn't open it because it was 926 feet away or something like that, rather than 1,000. Stupid restrictions. There's no need for these sorts of things. So finding a location for new housing or new shelters is very difficult. There's very little, or, people that want to participate in that. Even landlords have a difficulty in accepting vouchers, right? So, and I tried to leave my citations at the bottom of the slides, but if you guys had any questions as to where I got my information, I'm more than happy to share. Now, the city of Seattle, if you want to switch this slide, this landscape, I'm not going to read this one in full. I'm happy to read the titles, which is reckless burning, parking enforcement, 72 hours, pedestrian interference, and I want to make everyone look at number 2 on that, aggressively begs. To whose standards? To whose standards? Karen's? A person is, oh yeah, and then failure to disperse. He refuses to intentionally fails to obey a public safety order to move or disperse or refrain or. These vague problems is what makes it so they can put anybody under this blanket.
Right.
The vagueness is how we get there. And so I feel like that's where we need to see a little bit more definition in our wording, especially around, as I always advocate for, the wording around domestic violence and fleeing, and how it can't be vague, because I don't know if you guys picture a Plinko game. If anybody doesn't know what Plinko is, I believe it's when you put the coin at the top and it goes ding, 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 ding. And sometimes you get to the end, but most of the time it won't get anywhere near it. And I kind of picture the system, unfortunately, I picture the system like that. And I would like for it to be where I'm getting the gold at the bottom, right? So we're hitting all these barriers, and then one day you're just not longer qualified anymore because you said one thing, you did one thing, or you didn't do one thing. And these barriers, we're creating a dichotomy between who's more homeless than the other person, who's more vulnerable than the other person. And this creates a discrepancy in our human value in ourselves, because when I tried to get housing, couldn't, no matter how hard I tried. Everybody's like, well, you're a girl, you can get housing. You went through domestic violence, you can get housing. No, you can't. It's a lot more difficult than that. And when you're harmed by the system, it's a lot more difficult to just log in or call them, So these active living laws that we have here, we do have a lot of concerns voiced by the community that surrounds drug use and violence. And we're not always, committed to fixing those problems. We Band-Aid them more often than not. The best way they Band-Aid them is because they have shut down the mental health systems, and they just put them into the jail, into a cell with a thing on or whatever, the spit mask.
No inpatient.
Yeah, no inpatient, nothing. And they don't give them any sort of, it's crazy. So these supports are important. And a lot of people, when they enter homelessness, don't have the support system. So why is criminalizing homeless people the wrong solution? It doesn't solve anything. That's why. So, that is switched, my bad. Yeah, that's the one. Sorry about that, guys. So why is criminalizing homeless people the wrong solution? Well, because it doesn't work. It's never been lock them up, throw in the key. That's never worked. We've done studies, we've done research. It's just the facts at this point that criminalizing anybody doesn't work. Criminalizing youth, criminalizing graffiti artists, criminalizing anybody by legislature does not work. And the reason that is it's unconstitutional when we're doing it to homeless individuals or people that are currently experiencing homelessness. I need to get my language right. And sweeps violate many amendments to the Bill of Rights of Humans, or as Americans, I guess I should say, as the United States of America. And they violate the 4th, 8th, and 14th Amendments. And I did leave some of the cases there on the screen if you wanted to look into it. But they basically talk about the fact that search and seizure isn't fair if it's not abandoned, and they can't say it's not abandoned, and because they weren't able to verify if it's abandoned, quite frankly. And the other portion is evictions. You get 14 days when you're living in a house. Why do you only get 3 or maybe less? Even if it is a resolution, if it's your home, if it's your, like where you're living, I don't think that you don't have a landlord, but maybe the landlord would be the state, so I feel like maybe there has to be some work around how long they have notice if they're going to be doing a resolution. I would like to see some better policy around that. Just as somebody who's had 21 days to vacate and stuff, we got to at least get a letter. The other portion is that it doesn't solve the root causes. So the major funnel into homelessness won't be changed by arresting or fining people experiencing homelessness. The effects of colonialism, systemic discrimination, and racist zoning practices, redlining, have plagued the BIPOC communities, low-income households, and anyone who is, in the LGBTQIA Two-Spirit Plus community, anyone that, as Lee's mentioned before, that works in the human trafficking industry. A lot of these communities, the deaf and blind community, I've heard, has been left out. Youth and young adults has been, the funnel from, from foster care.
Yes.
Many of these problems are just literally legislature. Lise, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to make, sorry, again, sick brain. I know that there are folks who are affected by human trafficking, but folks who are engaging and criminalized for in survival sex work, like there are people who, again, like participate in like consensual, like self-directed sex work. And I just want to, I know that a lot of the narrative in like, especially like criminalizing like clients come from like the argument that like these sex workers are all victims, and that is not entirely true. And also when again, like for like criminalize like not only sex workers but the clients as well, it is more likely for clients to be less willing to disclose their identity, and then the supply and demand thing makes it less possible for sex workers to choose who their clients are and aren't. It just results in a lot of unsafety. So not all workers are victims of trafficking or other circumstances, but trafficking, definitely huge issue, especially when it comes to minors. Or I don't want to say because it's important and bad regardless of age, but sex trafficking is bad, and also sex workers deserve rights and to not be criminalized at such high rates.
Absolutely. No. Yes, thank you so much. And I just don't know I just wasn't familiarized like with the proper language surrounding it. So I really appreciate that. That's really very helpful for me, because you're absolutely right. And so we are, as we discuss, these underrepresented communities, as somebody from White Center, like there's areas that are underrepresented and more, as we were discussing, more criminalized than others. And that's a very scary and very unsafe environment to live in. So when you're living in that fight or flight, or you're scared because of the system, now we can go to the next one. We need to remember to lift up the fact that BIPOC communities, people that are working in criminalized areas, as Lise was touching on, the sex workers, and then human trafficking and everything like that, when you're working on these edges, you have a more chance to come in contact with the police, right?
Yes.
And if you're homeless on top of that, you have an even higher chance. And just because everything you do outside is considered illegal, or unlawful, I should say. And so, here's the journey through the justice system when you're, when you have no resources or funds to pay your fines and stuff like that. So you're caught committing an act of living law, for instance, a speeding ticket or, just staying over your time, and you can't pay the fine, you'll get a bench warrant. Once you get the bench warrant, you can't pay or be released without bail because you can't afford it. Or you didn't know you were supposed to bring your cash with you. I don't know, speaking from experience or not, but lengthy pretrial detention, maybe you accept the plea because you just don't want to deal with it anymore. You don't understand, you don't have representation. The probation could be denied without an address or an ID. And you can't pay the court fees, so you get additional incarceration, loss of job or voting rights or access to benefits. But most importantly, loss of dignity, your trust in the system, your trust in yourself, what have you. And so that's just barely scratching the surface as to the harm that people can experience through the justice system. And it's important to talk about individuals that have lost their lives via the criminal justice system and how we're paying more for the criminal justice system than we are for supporting our community that lives unsheltered. The next slide. So what are the alternatives to criminalizing people experiencing homelessness? There has to be some, right? Best practices and things that we've done a lot of research on, and it's very important for our other members of this community, like the governing committee, to understand the implications that it causes. And so what alternatives are we using within the COC here? We do have a few that we can touch on. I'm very excited to talk to you about those. However, we're going to start with the Homeless Bill of Rights. And this is something that I did believe I spoke at the last meeting, and I think, Lise, you brought up the fact that, there's many people that have been left out of the Bill of Rights in the US. And that's a very large point that we need to be very, cognizant of, right? A lot of people get ignored. And so we do have to implement these bills of rights for everybody, it seems, and if that's what it takes, then let's do it. Because although, this is another portion of HUD, they said, although individuals experiencing homelessness should be afforded the same dignity, compassion, and support provided to others, criminalization policies further marginalize men and women and those who are the part of the LGBTQIA Two-Spirit Plus community, who are experiencing homelessness, fuel inflammatory attitudes, and may even unduly restrict constitutionally protected liberties and violate our international human rights obligations. They mention international, but I should say that we don't follow the international, etymology of homelessness. So come on, HUD. No, I'm just kidding. Now the Bill of Rights, advocates for people currently experiencing homelessness to have equal rights to such things as medical care, free speech, free movement, and free movement means free movement to where you want to go as an individual, autonomy, freedom to vote, opportunities for employment without being, discriminated. I was gonna say decriminalized. I've been saying a lot of DE words today. I didn't do that. That's fine. Yeah, and so then it also takes, it would give them the right to privacy. Right. Which is, again, we're talking about today, those walls gone, you don't have privacy anymore. And even if you have a tent, they can see you if you've got a flashlight on.
Yeah.
So remember that, guys. So many states, including Connecticut, Illinois, and Rhode Island, as well as Puerto Rico, which is not a state, but they are a territory, have passed Homeless Bill of Rights, and they do have a COC too. I didn't know that Puerto Rico had a COC, so we do take care of them with that. But the Homeless Bill of Rights was passed in those 3 states and Puerto Rico, which provides limited non-discrimination protections for people experiencing homelessness. There's over 120 organizations in 5 different states that have shown support for homeless persons' Bill of Rights and are working towards its implementation. 3 states have enacted I already said the Homeless Bill of Rights, and Representative Cori Bush introduced a federal unhoused Bill of Rights in July 2021. Did it make it through? No. But the right to rest laws that have been tried to be introduced in California, Colorado, and Oregon, as well as here in Washington, none of them have made it past committee hearings, but we do have the conversation on the table. It's time to start working with our advocacy representatives. And we are almost, I see that we've got our note from Kelsey. We've got only a couple slides left, and then we're gonna open it up for a quick discussion before we get dinner or lunch. Alex just went to go grab it, so we know that's on the way. And the right to rest acts that have been discussed as well prohibit governments from punishing people for resting in outdoor spaces open to the public in a non-obstructive and non-hazardous manner, which I guess is the most sensible way to do that. I don't know. It's not fair. They should have housing. Introduction to 2020, or introduction in 2020 of a California bill, which would have amended its state constitution to recognize the human right to housing, the first in the nation it would have been. And Connecticut bill introduced recognizes housing as a human right, but it passed in the state Senate, but it didn't survive the legislative session. And so again, it's elitism restricting. So the next slide is, oh, I'm so sorry, Jade. I didn't see that you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was gonna wait till you were done.
Oh,
It's a HUD question, so
Sure.
you keep going.
okay, cool. I'll hopefully can answer it, but let's see. So the next slide is this might be a good time to ask it. I was just going to go into the approaches that we have done. So, or maybe I should finish the slides first. Sorry.
Your show, just
All right, I'll be really quick. So a few of the ways that the CLC has been trying to apply the decriminalization is through housing first approach. And I wanted to make sure that I had the actual definition that we go by from the KCRHA's website, which is supposed to be our delegating. And which no matter who we are, where we come from, or what we look like, every person deserves safe and stable place to live. Housing first, which is actually housing plus services, is a proven evidence-based best practice. Housing first recognizes that housing and the security it brings, or stability it offers, is the necessary first step to addressing other medical, mental health, substance use issues a person may be facing, and supports employment, education, and other efforts towards self-sufficiency. Quickly, Housing First comes from the Pathways to Housing study that was done in, I believe, the late 90s, early thousands in New York. So I read that. It definitely shows all of the permanent supportive housing is the way to go. Like people stay, the retention rate's better. So housing is not only housing, it has supportive services too. Now, the real solution is housing services and protecting renters works better than most, and it's most cost effective. During the application of emergency rental assistance fund, studies found while stabilization, AKA rental assistance or eviction prevention, typically costs about $2,000 per household, rarely more, but about $2,000 a month or two rent, versus anywhere from shelters and housing costing nearly $27,000 to $68,000 per person, depending on what intervention has been used. So there's also, Alon wanted me to include that we did have success with the emergency housing voucher program through HUD, and they distributed more than 70,000, and we got about 1,300 of those and did distribute them all. And they were looking to get 100,000 in, or 200,000 in 2022, or 2024, but they weren't able to get that from the federal government, of course. Of course not. And so the last thing I wanted to speak quickly to is the right of way initiative, which again is another thing that Alon wanted me to touch on, how they've been able to move people into permanent supportive housing. It's an opportunity to utilize an aspect of legislature to get people into permanent supportive housing. Alon is not with us to go in depth on why, but I would be remiss to say, as he always says, I would be remiss to say that it's not a very large part that I didn't quite look at the same way he was looking at. So I thank him very much for bringing that to my ability to understand. And so I'll leave that up while we take questions, because we only have a few minutes left before lunch. And I just want to thank you guys so much for engaging with us today. And I hope that I hope that it was fruitful and that we can continue this conversation after lunch. So, thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you, Ruby, that was amazing.
And Jade, if you wanted to go ahead.
Yes, okay, so I have a question and then now I kind of have a statement. I just want
That's
to plant
great.
the seed
Yeah.
that the right-of-way initiative is actually really harmful. Those are actually forced displacements, even though a lot of folks did get into permanent supportive housing. I would argue that these are actually sweeps because not everybody gets into housing. And
Yes.
the initiative itself, not necessarily the people who have been working on it, but the initiative itself, the reason for it is not because they actually want to house people, it's because of aesthetics. They don't want the elitists driving on the highway and seeing something that they don't like or understand. So I would just plant that seed. But
No, you're
my
great.
question about HUD, I would say I'm fairly new to learning, understanding HUD policies, maybe over the last 3-4 years now. And my understanding from HUD, like I didn't know they were this like down for decriminalization. And so I'm wondering, what really is HUD Exchange? Because I'm looking at their website and I'm like, what? Trying to familiarize myself.
Yeah.
And then like, can we really trust that HUD is really down for decriminalization? Because from my experience with them, they got a whole lot of evictions going on, forced
Yep.
evictions going on, discrimination going on within the housing authorities, really
Yeah.
crappy zero oversight. So they're actively contributing to the problem ultimately of criminalization. So I'm like, what's really going on here? So I'd just be interested to hear your perspective.
No, that's great. Thank you for raising these topics. Again, I would say that Alon really encouraged me to have this slide of the right-of-way initiative in there. I personally was going to go a different direction with it as well, kind of in the direction that you're speaking to, because the right-of-way is again vague, very vague as to what is considered. And then the second portion of where you're talking about the HUD exchange is kind of their best practices manual in a way, kind of gives you all the info that they spit out as their, and because we are the COC, we have to kind of get a lot of like the charter information and stuff like that. I needed to touch on those things that HUD does state, but what we should also understand is the situation we're in. A lot of places aren't like a lot of places aren't succeeding in combating their like, you know, this mental health crisis, the homelessness crisis, and I think that HUD is definitely not as focused as maybe we would like them to be. So this really quickly, I'm just gonna say that basically there's one section on the entire NOFO that talks about decriminalization. So that could be a section that we work very diligently towards changing it from 1D-4 to at least an entire section. So I would say that we can put that into our charter. We can work on getting those kinds of, you know, words in there to make sure that we focus our work on decriminalization. They may not be down for it, but as long as we are checking those boxes that they sure do love us to check, we can utilize ourselves as the platform to be the box that gets checked, right? And so when we're in that position, we can put the wording that we need to see. So I encourage you to please bring up these like serious issues that pop up into your, you know, as somebody that's freshly looking at HUD exchange, what can we change, you know? So I see Bill and Kelsey's hand is up. I'm sure Kelsey's going to tell us it's almost lunch, but Bill, if you want to go quickly, I know that you you pay attention.
Yes, I just want to add, and we got bumped into this room because we were in a mute room. So you may have mentioned this, but it's not so much passing that harm the homeless. It's using existing laws in harmful and intentional ways, and especially around vehicles. Impounds, not enforcing the impound law for the lot to take care of the vehicle when it gets there, placing ecology blocks. There's plenty of laws right now, both not being enforced and also being enforced rigorously without outreach doing mitigation. So that's even worse. That's even worse actually than the intentional law that we get to go testify against.
Right. Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Bill. Kelsey, I'm going to let you talk in just a quick second. So yes, you're right. We focused on that. And I think that it's very important to bring this to the, you know, it's not just the private laws too, right? People that are private business owners, private housing owners, they can have their own rules. All right, Kelsey, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to uplift in the chat. We have a wonderful HUD TA support, so technical assistance provider, Susan Starrett, who's in our group, and she also just put in some information on the HUD exchange. I think another thing that's just really important to consider about HUD and what they're promoting is that it can really shift with who the president is, because that's who appoints the head of HUD, and what direction HUD goes in. During the Trump administration, there was a lot of work to wipe the HUD exchange of anything regarding housing first. So thinking also about how the political landscape, both locally and nationally, really impacts, what is supported and what is in not just the NOFO, but the best practices and the technical assistance that's provided.
Thank you for that, Kelsey. Thank you.
Yeah, the other piece I wanted to speak to, Jade, to your comment on like the public housing authorities, those exist somewhat separately from HUD. So while HUD provides funding to public housing authorities, they also work locally and have local policies with the public housing authorities. So connecting with them around the local level and what evictions are going on and what their policies are is really important. So it's not just coming from HUD guidance, but those are decisions done at the local level. So locally, we have 3 housing authorities. We have the King County Housing Authority, the Renton Housing Authority, and the Seattle Housing Authority. And all of those run and operate as independent, like separate entities and independent entities that have boards. And, looking at, what are some of the things that locally we can do to be supporting people. So those are a couple of things I wanted to lift. And I know Susan also put some other things in the chat.
Get rid of the law.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Kelsey. It's very important to uplift where we're not seeing the connections, because I think that that's the biggest misunderstanding, is that when we're not seeing the connections, it gets misunderstood and we don't know what the heck anybody's meaning by anything. So thank you so much. And if Susan, if you have a second and you wanted to come off mute and tell us a little bit more about your perspective, as a HUD TA, that'd be great. But if we don't have time, I understand. I know we got to get to lunch soon. So
thank you for that, Ruby. And I've been dropping stuff into the chat. So if folks want to engage more, and I can put my email address in the chat as well. If anybody wants to like side chat it, I'm really happy to have any of these conversations with you guys. And Ruby, you've done an amazing job facilitating. So thank you for this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'd love to grab your email. So if you want to drop that, that'd be fabulous. And is there any other questions, discussion, comments while we're here?
1 minute left.
As room wraps up, we went in for an hour lunch break. We will reconvene at 1. Yeah, so when we take our break, thank you, Kelsey. When we take our break, we will come back in an hour, so at 1 p.m. And we're all gonna have some of Zell's chicken here, so.
More questions and answers.
Yeah, so we'll come back and talk a little bit more after this, and I'm not really sure as to how to do this ending thing, but thank you guys.
I'll close our room and bring everyone to the
Thank you,
main room.
Kelsey.
Ruby, you have done great. This has been wonderful. If folks do have any other questions, you can please send those to coc.questions@kcrha. We're also going to be starting the 1 p.m. with kind of a recap of each of these sessions. So a space to have larger conversations with the full participant group. So really look forward to holding that space as well. So I will close our groups and take everyone to the main one. And we will also see you at 1 o'clock if folks want to disperse.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Kelsey.
How do we put it on mute, the speaker?